So, the question comes up, should you train your martial arts techniques on both sides of your body? Hi, my name is Joe, and welcome to Fighting Words. So, today I'm going to address a question that I've seen a lot of beginners ask, and that is whether or not one should train martial arts techniques on both sides of their bodies. I've seen a lot of different reasons given for why one should and why one should not. I think one of the best reasons comes from a self-defense perspective, and that is that life is unpredictable. If I get attacked, I don't know what state I'm going to be in. So my attacker could be coming from my right side or from my left side, or I could get turned around. I don't get to choose necessarily what side is facing my opponent. So in that case, it would be a good idea to train both sides equally so that I'm well versed in throwing punches with my right hand and throwing punches with my left hand, and so on. Another idea I've seen is if you get injured, this sometimes comes from the sport crowd. I've seen some stunt workers talk about it too. If I'm primarily known for throwing a technique on one side, and I pull a muscle or something like that, I need to be at the very least passable at it on the other side as well. Similarly, if I'm in a full contact sparring match, and what happens if I'm used to throwing a big right hand and I throw it and boom, I feel something in here break. Can't throw this anymore. I need to have an educated left hand in order to have a fighting chance. Another good reason to train techniques equally on both sides is that in a sport contest, I get to be less predictable. If my opponent knows what's coming at him, if, for instance, Conor McGregor was known for having an incredibly powerful left straight from the rear side. So if you could avoid being in the path of that, then that took away a lot of his main artillery. Now, in that particular context, as a fighter, he did a really good job of building a support system that would funnel people into that left hand. But for the sake of argument, let's say that I'm known for throwing that left hand, and everybody prepares for it, so they start to circle away from it. Well, what if I just switch stance and they don't know I've been practicing with my right hand too? Again, now I'm unpredictable. Both hands carry the same sort of power, right? And another reason I've thought about training both sides, again, for more of a sporting contest, maybe you, being on the other side of having somebody who's known for having a really good weapon off of this side of their body. And I know that if I face them the way I normally would, then I will be vulnerable to that particular weapon. If I switch sides and I start using my opposite side, it might mess with them. Because at that point, they're not going to be sure, all the avenues that they thought were open, I've now closed off, and I am being far less predictable to them. I remember, for instance, I was in a school that had just started a judo program, and of course, we were training left hand grabs the collar, right hand grabs the sleeve, and that's how everybody did things. And me, I'm not really ambidextrous, but I have enough comfort with using my offside that, I can use my offside better than most other people. So I switched up and started grabbing the collar with my right side and the sleeve with my left, and I didn't get any better, but nobody in the class was expecting throws and sweeps to come from the opposite side that they'd been training. So when I knew all of my opponents had prepared for somebody grabbing the right, then when I switched it up, I started grabbing their left collar. It really sort of threw them off. So that's an example of, based on what you know your opponent's bringing to the table, how you can switch up your attacks if you train both sides equally. And finally, if your school requires it, that's the thing about martial arts. There are so many different martial arts schools, so many different programs. Maybe your school has a program where you are required to actually demonstrate every technique in your syllabus on both sides. Obviously, you'd want to train both sides. So, what are the reasons for not training equally on both sides? Well, I think one of the best arguments I've heard, at least for competitive sports, actually came from Marcelo Garcia. I think it got referenced in his book on the X-Guard, that he wanted to train a technique exclusively on one side and a different technique exclusively on the other. His logic behind that was, why would I give up being 100% effective on this side for being 50% effective on both sides? And I think to an extent that makes sense. You also have people whose physiology will not allow them to practice same techniques equally on both sides. I'm reminded of Bill Superfoot Wallace, who came from a judo background where he had injured his knee, his right knee. So he stopped doing judo, he got into karate. So in karate, when they were doing line drills, it's, punches and kicks up and down the floor of the training hall, he couldn't actually do any kicks with his right leg. But he wound up doing twice as many kicks with his left leg. And this made him certainly the best kicker of his era, the most dexterous. And it really played into him developing his own personal fighting style. And I've also seen instances where competitors in sports were amputees. So because they were asymmetrical, they couldn't practice the same technique on both sides. So obviously, you can't change reality. So you would need to focus on what techniques are appropriate for one side and then adjust to whatever techniques are appropriate for the other side. And finally, you may be a student at a school where the school very specifically wants you to do certain techniques on one side and not the other. In the original karate school I came from, we had a series of block and attack techniques. And 1 through 9 was always done on the same side, and because of that, there was no reason to practice them on the other side, except maybe for personal amusement, maybe a bit of a challenge. But because of that, if I were preparing for a test, there would be no reason for me to practice them on the right side when all the techniques, for the most part, came from the left side. So ultimately, it's up to you how you would approach your personal training. I do think that the self-defense argument is strong, and I know a lot of people get into martial arts for self-defense. So I would generally suggest for personal development, at least every now and then, you do switch up what side you are practicing your techniques on if you're only used to practicing them on one side. It will help build new neural pathways in your brain. It will add to plasticity in your brain. Learning new things does that. And it can also come in handy in these other situations that I've described. If you're used to punching on your left side and you get attacked on your right side, what are you going to do? Excuse me, sir, hold on while I switch into the appropriate stance, or are you just going to go, well, gee, maybe I should practice on my right side too, you know? So anyway, that's all I have for this week, and I hope this gave you something to think about. And please let me know in the comments if you prefer practicing on one side or both sides and your reason behind that. So thank you very much. I'll see you next week.